Hi, thank you so much for coming back to Ms. Johnson's YouTube channel. This is Read Aloud time, and we are going to finish with the last chapter of I Survived the Eruption of Mount St. Helens. So we left off with Jess getting help from the helicopter and then eventually finding her friends. So we're going to kind of see what happens after that. This is chapter 16, and here we go. Let's see what happens at the end. Chapter 16. 2 months later, Sunday, July 20th, 1980, Seattle, Washington. Jess was cleaning up her room. She checked the clock. 10 o'clock. Better hurry. She and Mom were having visitors today, and they'd been working nonstop all weekend to get the apartment ready. They'd been in their new place for only a week, but already they were unpacked. Jess loved her new room, which was bright and sunny. She was still getting used to the Seattle noises and the crowds of people, but she liked to hear more than she had expected to. She moved carefully, and the burn on her back still hurt as she turned too suddenly, but it had healed well. She was glad she could see what it looked like. Mom popped her head through the doorway. "Let's not forget our camera," Mom said. "I have it ready," Jess said. Their new camera. Jess had finally worked up the courage to tell Mom the whole story about losing Dad's camera. "It was Dad's prized possession," Jess said, fighting back tears. Mom put her arms around her. "No," she said. "You were." Mom looked around Jess's room and smiled. "It looks great in here," she said. Jess agreed. The walls were covered with photographs of trees and birds and of Mom, pictures that Dad had taken. His dream had been for his photographs to hang in a Seattle gallery, and now the dream had come true. Almost. "And I really do love the red," Mom said, admiring her freshly painted walls. Jess loved the color too. She knew that for the rest of her life, red would be her lucky color. Dr. Morales had helped them paint the room. Jess was glad to see their friend was starting to smile again. He'd been safe in his lab here in Seattle when St. Helens erupted, but like many of the scientists, he blamed himself for not being able to better predict the eruption. And he had lost one of his close friends, a young scientist who had been near the mountain when it exploded. That man was one of 57 people who died in the eruption. Some people were killed instantly, in the pyroclastic surge and blast of the rock and ash. Others died in the floods and mudslide that raced down the mountain on the hours afterwards. Dr. Morales had been right when he'd predicted that Mount St. Helens would erupt with terrible violence. But not even he had imagined just how powerful the eruption would be. It was one of the most powerful in history, more explosive even than Belay. The entire front of the mountain shattered. Millions and tons of rock and ice and volcanic debris crashed down the mountain. The pyroclastic surge instantly destroyed everything within a 5-mile path. If Jess and the twins had been much closer, they would not have escaped with their lives. A mudslide swept down the mountain, picking up trees and logs and trucks and houses and bridges. The downtown of Cedar was spared, but some people lost their homes, including Missy. She and her family were with relatives in Iowa. Jess was thinking about writing to her. She wanted to tell Missy the news, that skeleton woman really did exist. In a way. Jess had discovered this about a month after the eruption. By then, Jess's burn had almost healed. She and Mom had been helping serve meals at a shelter for people who had lost their homes. There was another volunteer working that day, an older woman with long gray braid and bright blue eyes. "You know," the woman said to Jess with a smile. "Oh, I know you," the woman said to Jess with a smile, and Jess remembered her. She was the woman with the white pickup who they'd seen at Loomis Lake parking lot that day of the first earthquake. Her name was Gretchen Livingston. She worked for a group that had been trying to save the big old trees near Loomis Lake. Gretchen and Mom had hit it off, and after a few nights later at Clive's, Gretchen had told Mom and Jess her secret, that she was Skeleton Woman. "What?" Jess gasped. Gretchen smiled slightly. "For years, our group had been trying to find ways to stop the lumber company from chopping down the beautiful old trees," she explained. "But nothing we did worked, and finally, the company was going to cut them all down. I was ready to give up, but one day, I was in the restaurant over in Cougar. That was a small town across the valley. I overheard some loggers in the booth behind me. They were talking about old Skeleton Woman legend. Of course, I'd heard the story when I was a kid." "Me too," Mom said. The men were spooked by the story. I guess the old witch was supposed to live near Loomis Lake, in the old-grown forest, right where they were supposed to be cutting." She leaned forward. "That gave me an idea. She found out they were cutting off the trees. She found out when they were cutting of the trees and set to begin, and she snuck into the part of the forest. She went into the shack and waited. I got my hair all wild and spluttered some red paint on my clothes. I saw the paint in the shack, Jess said. As the men were getting their chainsaws ready, Gretchen continued, I burst out of the cabin and dashed through the forest very quickly so that they could catch a glimpse of me. She smiled proudly, and that did it. They wouldn't go back. That's when Jess dawned on her. So you're the one who found my camera in the cabin. Ah, that was your camera, she said. I couldn't imagine who would have left it there. We were looking for a skeleton woman, and Jess said, well, you found her, Gretchen said. They all laughed. Then Gretchen got tears in her eyes. But of course the forest is gone now, she said. Not even skeleton woman would stop St. Helens from destroying it all. 230 miles of wilderness had been burned, ripped apart, or burned under 100 feet of mud and debris. Millions of trees were killed in the burning wind. The forest will grow back one day, Mom said, in her usual hopeful way. Nature has an amazing power to heal itself. Dr. Morales had told them that. And it was true. The trees would grow back, the animals would return, and it would take decades. And Jess wasn't sure if she'd want to go back. She wanted to remember the beautiful mountain the way it had been. It was only a few weeks after the talk with Mom they decided that they were finally ready to move to Seattle. She wanted to go back to college to become a teacher. She wanted Jess to discover life outside of Cedar. Mr. Rowan had offered to buy Clive's. He'd been badly hurt in the eruption. Didn't want to go back to his regular job. Mr. and Mrs. Rowan would run the restaurant, and of course the twins could help. So in a way, Clive's would stay in the Marlowe family. Jess's throat tightened as she thought of the twins. She would never forget the terrifying hours after they were rescued in the forest. The boys had flown into a special hospital in Portland, Oregon, where they stayed for weeks. When they finally got home, Jess slept in the floor of the room every night until they were strong again. Jess still wasn't used to not seeing them every day, but when she closed her eyes, she could hear them happy, bickering noises. When she felt lonely, she could feel their hands gripping hers in their secret handshake. She'd spoken to them every day since the move, and today the whole Rowan family was coming to visit. Jess and Mom had a big surprise for the twins, a Mariners game. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. Jess rushed to the door. She flung it open, and there they were, Sam and Eddie, two buzz-cut heads, four smiling green eyes, and 10,000 freckles. Four strong arms grabbed a hold of her. 3 hearts pounded with happiness. It was a long time before they let each other go. Okay, so that is the ending of I Survived the Eruption of Mount St. Helens. I had a really good time reading this story. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. Stay tuned for a new series for the Read Aloud portion on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for checking it out. I'll see you later. Bye, everybody.